For the first time in my life, I can now touch my toes with ease, but it wasn't until I came across these 3 stretches and these 3 basic rules to follow that I've been actually able to achieve this. Many times in the past I've tried and I've failed. So I'm excited to show you in this video what these 3 stretches are and what the 3 basic rules that you must follow if you actually want to achieve these results. Let's begin. Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Steven, if you haven't met me. And today we're talking about stretching, and this is a routine I've now been doing for a year, and I've actually managed to achieve these results. But there are a few things that you have to follow and a few things that I've managed to work out. But once you work it out, it's actually quite simple if you can follow this for a consistent amount of time. So firstly, why flexibility? Why should you even focus this on the first place? Well, flexibility is important because it allows you to move through a larger range of motion. This is really important for your joints because the joints need movement, and the bigger the movement, the better to stay healthy, but also to stimulate your brain. It's important for longevity, reducing aging, etc. It allows you to be able to do certain movements in your day, and it massively helps for injury prevention like back pain or sports injuries. So if you do a certain sport or you go to the gym and you want to reduce injuries there, then being flexible is really important. Now, what is also really important is that you're not doing these stretches just before the sport or before you do strengthening, because you're actually more likely to injure yourself, and I'm going to speak about that more in just a second. So what actually happens when you're stretching? Well, you're stretching primarily the muscle and the tendon to increase its length. That's going to allow the joint to move more, but you're also stretching the tissues surrounding that joint, including the ligaments. This is going to then allow you to get into certain positions and do certain movements, which is particularly important for sports, because if we are doing a sport, that means we have to be able to get into these large range of motions, but we're not training these motions, we're actually more likely to get an injury because your body's not used to going into that position. So what are these 3 stretches? Well, the first one I'm going to show you now, and it's called a couch stretch. Now, with the couch stretch, there are many different progression levels that you can work with depending on where your flexibility currently lies. Now, for me, this seems to be the easiest one right from the beginning. For some reason, I've got very flexible quadriceps, but my hamstrings are where my weakness actually is. So I can get into a quite good position on this one, but I'll show you how you can change it if you're not quite as flexible on these muscles as I am. So what you're going to do, you need a soft pad on the bottom here for your knee to lie on, and then your foot is just going to go back just like this, and then you're aiming to get the heel to your buttock, and then you want to go back as far as you can, and ideally you want to aim to touch the mid-back and your shoulders against the wall here, and you want your knee as close up to the wall as possible, and then you're just going to relax in this position. The aim is to hold this for 1 minute, and then we're going to go through this routine, and then we're going to go through it again. So in total you have 2 sets doing 1 minute each time. Now, if you can't get into this position, don't worry, because there are a few things that we can change. Firstly, we can move the knee further away from the wall. That's going to immediately take off a lot of tension away from here. And the other thing is that you don't have to worry about getting the back to the wall straight away. You might just start off in this position and then work your way up to being able to come back and also bringing the knee back. Now, as the name of this suggests, it is a couch stretch, which means you can actually do it against the couch, which in some respects may be a little bit easier to start with. Now, we're going to hold this for 60 seconds, just literally relaxing, taking some deep breaths in, and then we're going to switch the sides. So now the left side, as so the left side is against the wall. I'm going to move this back again. So the left side is against the wall, and then again we're going to hold this for 60 seconds. Now, there are 3 basic rules for stretching that I think are really vital if you want to achieve the results. Number 1 is consistency. This takes a long time for your body to adapt. and it took me a good few months until I started to notice the improvements. So what I would suggest is do it for at least a few months, at least 3 months, until you start to really assess whether it's working for you or not. After 3 months is when I started to see a consistent increase in my flexibility, and then after about 6 to 8 months is when I could touch the floor and do it with a lot more ease, and it was a lot more consistent. Now, number 2 is, and I mentioned this at the beginning, is static stretching is better than dynamic if you want to increase your flexibility. Dynamic is good if you want to warm up for a sport or for the gym, but if you want to increase flexibility, then the static is going to be the best. So you just want to hold the position for a certain amount of time, and in this instance I'll suggest 60 seconds. Now, the third rule is that muscles work together. Muscles aren't isolated, but they work in chains. So all the muscles, so what we're doing with this couch stretch here is that we're training, we are stretching the quadricep, the front of the leg here, as well as the front of the foot, and the whole thing works together, and therefore if you've got a tightness at one point in that chain, you're going to have a tight, it can affect basically anywhere in that chain. So you want to stretch the whole thing. But the other thing is that the front of your leg here works together with the back of your leg. So if you've got tightness on one side, you are likely to have tightness on the other side as well, or it will affect it. Because if you've got tightness on one side, the other side has to tighten up to be able to keep the joint in a neutral position. So this is where I went wrong in the past, was that I was only training my hamstring because that was my weakness. But where I really started to see the results is when I started to train the hamstring, the glute, the calf, and the bottom of the foot, and doing that as one chain. And the nice thing about this is you can do this in one exercise, which is the next exercise I'm going to show you. And then for the front of the legs is the couch stretch. You're training or you're stretching the quadricep, the front of the leg, and the front of the foot. And when it comes to stretching, I do like efficiency because it's not necessarily the most interesting exercise to do. And so I can do this in 10 minutes. This whole thing takes 10 minutes to do all twice, so 5 minutes each time. So let's go on to the second one, and this is going to be a simple hamstring with a bit of calf stretch, and then we'll move on to the third one after that. Okay, so this one is simply just going to be sitting up as far back as you can against the wall, and then you're going to straighten out the legs, and then you can try and bring the toes back towards you a little bit. And then even for me, in this position, provided I'm upright here, so not slumping into it, but I'm nice and upright, I can already feel the stretch at the back of my hamstrings, and it's also going to stretch the calf. And when you start bringing the toes back is when you're going to start to feel it in the bottom of your feet. But you also might only feel it in the muscle that you're actually the most tight in, and it also depends on the position that you're in. So here I can really feel it in my hamstrings, and I can feel it a little bit in my calf. And what I do here is I just try to lightly stretch forwards, and that's quite an intense stretch for me. So I kind of stay in this kind of position. I can put my hands here to just take the pressure off the back as much as possible. And I do find that when you're stretching the hamstrings, it can be hard to do this in a way that doesn't jeopardize the back. And particularly if you've got back issues, you do want to be careful of this, because essentially what you're doing is the hamstrings, they attach to the pelvis, and if you're stretching the hamstrings, it's pulling on the pelvis. So it can create some pressure in that area, which is okay if you're used to it, but if you have a back issue, just be cautious. So again, in this position, hold it for a minute. Now, if you're very flexible, you might be able to come all the way down and be able to hug your legs, and that's great if you can do that. I'm working towards that. Hold that for 1 minute. And again, the nice thing about these is quite passive. Sometimes I just hold these positions and I might do something on the phone or whatever. So hold this for 1 minute, and then we move on to the last one, which is a more focus towards the calf. Okay, so this one, again, you're going to want something soft on the floor for your heel to lie on. Now, if you've got very cushioned shoes, then you might be all right. You're going to put your hands in the press-up position against the wall, and you're going to start with one leg, and you can just put the heel on that cushioned part with the foot up against the wall. Now, obviously, the further your foot is up against the wall, the more of a stretch you're going to feel more specifically in the calf. So you have to find a position that works well for you. Put your hands in the press-up position, and then keeping your knee straight, and you're going to bring the whole of your body towards one hand, and then towards the middle, and then towards the other hand. Now you'll notice that this is more of a dynamic stretch. What I like to do with this one, because I do like to create a little bit of dynamic stretching, is to do 30 seconds of dynamic to get across here. So you're going to the 3 positions because you're aiming to get different fibers of the calf. And then what I'll do for the last 30 seconds is I'll come forwards into a position that I can really feel that stretch, not too much, not too little, and then hold that for the next 30 seconds. So altogether, we're doing it for 1 minute. And you should really feel that right down the back of your leg. Now you'll probably feel this a bit more on the calf, or just generally if you've got more tightness in a specific muscle. Then once you've held this for 1 minute, you then switch over and you do exactly the same thing on the other side, just like this. So again, 30 seconds going across to each area, and then just holding in the middle like this. You can rest your head against the wall. And then after 30 seconds, so 1 minute in total, then that's all of them. And then what I do is I go back to the very start, so go back to the couch stretch, and then do that all over again. So each one takes 5 minutes, so it's 10 minutes in total. Now the question is, how many times a week should you do this? So you only need to do this once a day. So you're doing it 10 minutes each day. So each exercise you're doing twice, holding for 1 minute. Now to start with, I would recommend do it about 5 or 6 times in the week. You might be able to get away with doing it 4. You need to do it quite consistently and quite regularly if you want to get the results. And the more regularly you do it, the quicker the results are going to be. If you don't do it regularly enough, you might find that you just can't make that progress. Now, once you've got a flexibility that you're happy with, then you can really dial it down just to maintain it. But if you cut it out completely, it's likely that you'll just go back to where you were or close to where you were. So mine started about 5 times a week. And then now I do it about 2 or 3 times a week, and I find that it's been able to maintain that level quite well. Now, what's also really important is that you're training, you're strengthening your muscles in these positions. And so there are other exercises that you can do to make sure that you're also strong when you're going into these more flexible positions, and that's really important. And that's why stretching is not good to just do it alone, but you also want to do strengthening. So the two combined are really, really good. And some of the best strengthening exercises that also incorporate flexibility that I would really highly recommend to do on top of this are the ones that Knees Over Toes guy recommends. It's a guy called Ben Patrick. I'll put a link to his channel just above here. I'll highly recommend that you check that out. He goes through further stretching exercises that you can add on top. However, if you were just to do these 3, you will still get good results. And I like to not have to do too much all at once, because if it takes you half an hour or an hour, you may end up doing hardly anything. But certainly adding in some strengthening will really, really help. So check out Knees Over Toes Guy channel. Ben Patrick does some phenomenal exercises, and check out his story because he has a phenomenal story as well. Thank you again for watching, and I look forward to seeing you on my next video. So don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.